This presentation will address the focus question, how can nutrition and recovery strategies affect performance, with a specific focus on nutritional considerations. In terms of the syllabus, you'll be required to learn about pre-performance nutrition, including carbohydrate loading, during performance and post-performance nutrition. You'll also be asked to compare the dietary requirements of athletes in different sports, considering pre, during and post-performance needs. To fully understand nutritional considerations, it's important to have a good understanding of the nutrients. Carbohydrates is often seen as the most crucial energy source for the body. It is the preferred energy source for the body when participating in moderate to high intensity exercise. Protein is often seen as crucial to muscle recovery following exercise, and fat is often seen as a high energy or very dense energy source that is often used when carbohydrates have been exhausted. And hydration is important to maintain cooling, to ensure that evaporation can occur, and also to help to reduce the risk of dehydration. When thinking about fuel, it's important to use the analogy of a car. And just like a car, the body needs fuel. And if the body functioned like a car, you could look at it this way. The body has 3 fuel tanks. The first fuel tank is the glycogen fuel tank, which is the stored version of carbohydrates. The body would prefer to use that when we exercise. When that fuel source runs out, the body will then go to the fuel tank that contains fats or triglycerides. And when that's unusable, the body will then start to break down the infrastructure or the muscles, which contains protein. The engine of the car could be considered the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the muscle cell and produces the ATP. It's also important to understand the proportion of fat, carbohydrate and protein that's needed in our diets to ensure that we have adequate fuel. Another way of looking at it is by thinking about the muscle itself. Glycogen is the large fuel tank, which is the stored carbohydrate. Triglycerides is the stored lipids or fats, which is a smaller fuel tank. And the muscle protein, or the muscle tissue, is the stored protein, which the body will use when the other two are unavailable. It's also important to understand what happens to our food when it is digested. Carbohydrates such as breads and cereals are digested, which then leads to glucose being released into the blood. This is then later stored as glycogen in the muscles. Protein, on the other hand, such as meats, fish, and chicken, are broken down to form amino acids, which are often seen as the building blocks of muscles. Fats, such as margarine, butter, and dairy products, are broken down into fatty acids, which are very energy dense. So just an overview of carbohydrates. They provide the energy jumpstart, and carbohydrate use depends on an exercise intensity. At very low intensity, very little muscle glycogen is used as fuel, but at 65 to 85% of maximum heart rate, carbohydrate demand increases dramatically. Carbohydrates do not require oxygen to produce energy, such as seen with the lactic acid system, and is faster than fat to break down and actually use. The body prefers carbohydrates as fuel at very high intensity exercise. Fats are considered the long-burning fuel, and when low intensity exercise is occurring, fat is the primary fuel source. But as exercise intensity increases to 65 to 85% maximum heart rate, the percentage of fat use drops and the body then switches to use carbohydrates. So the longer the exercise lasts, the more the body will rely on fat to use, as the glycogen is often exhausted. So as glycogen level decreases, fatigue settles in and performance declines, as the fat requires more oxygen to replace the ATP. The choice of fuel depends on exercise intensity, and you can see in this particular graph that when exercise intensity is low, fat is the dominant energy source to create energy. But as exercise intensity increases, as seen in that green line, you can see that carbohydrates or glucose become the dominant energy source. Protein is considered backup energy and is used as an alternative energy source if glycogen and fat levels are exhausted. Protein is often considered a very important meal to consume post-performance, and it can help repair damaged muscle tissue. Consuming carbohydrates spares proteins from being used as energy, and protein really is only used as a last resort when the other two energy sources, glycogen and fat, are used.